Appeal has been made by some critics to stories from the ancient and modern world in which people were mistaken for being dead, which are in turn used to suggest that Jesus could have been mistaken for being dead. But how realistic is this? The ancient author Pliny the Elder lived roughly at the same time as Jesus. He recorded several stories of persons who were thought to be dead but turned out to be alive. But any critic that relies on Pliny as a credible witness to these events runs into a serious problem, especially if they criticize the Gospels for recording events they deem incredible. Here are some interesting reports we also find in Pliny's work. You would suspect that if the New Testament was discounted on the basis of reporting miracles, Pliny himself would lose some of his credibility on account of some of these reports. Of course, there are certain options. We could choose to believe Pliny about dead people, and about the rest as well, but somehow I don't see critics taking that route. We could choose to believe only the parts of Pliny we like, but that argument shatters on the points we have made before. There are ample signs of death that even the least perceptive ancient person could have observed, and would have observed on a regular basis. By itself, this renders Pliny's idea of mistakenly dead people into the category of the barking men. The ancient author Celsus, not to be confused with an author of the same name who wrote a scathing critique of Christianity, is said to have reported that even the best doctors sometimes misdiagnose death. While he does report rumors that some have revived while being carried out to burial, with no specifics as to conditions, names, dates, other than an anecdote. What he says of misdiagnosing death has to do with signs during an illness that leads to death, not with someone who has already died. I've also seen two modern cases appealed to as evidence that people could be mistaken for dead, but neither of these is much help to the crackpot theorist. Critics apparently wish to argue that Jesus may have been in a state comparable to these persons. But the Stringfellow woman was awakened apparently on her own, but perhaps because of her surroundings. The second person was wakened by the flash of a coroner's camera. Jesus was surrounded by stimulus of equal or greater magnitude after being taken down from the cross. The pain of having nails pulled from his arms and legs, of being carried down from the cross, of being carried around in the elements, at the very least, and probably more. If his condition was not that serious, which is unlikely, then why would he not have awakened or shown some sign as these people did? If his condition was more serious, then he would have died within moments or hours anyway, or remained in a comatose state, and critics have no counsel for us. The irony is that critics will go on to hypothesize that Jesus could have escaped from the tomb and perhaps made it around to do resurrection appearances. We'll talk more about that later. But doesn't it seem odd that critics must point to a state of health just bad enough not to be woken up by surrounding stimulus, but just good enough to be able to perform these activities, all within a period of less than 40 hours? Is there any medical case on record that is that absurd? None of these samples of mistaken dead fit that paradigm. It's just a contrived hypothesis seeking a pigeonhole between ranges of just enough to do the job. In close for this section, there's been a study on the subject of live burial by physician Jan Bondison, author of a book titled Buried Alive. It's a fascinating book that focuses especially upon a controversy only a century ago, in which there was a great fear of being buried alive. It resulted in all manner of political action and strange inventions such as caskets with connections to a bell or a flag outside. Bondison's findings, however, are far from supportive of efforts to argue that Jesus could have been mistaken for dead. Bondison acknowledges that many of the same signs I listed on the last vid would have served as signs of death. In the end, in any event, he decides that the number of verified cases of live burial can be counted on a pair of hands, and in many cases a premature burial was stopped by an outward sign from the supposedly deceased, and those were within the context of more modern times when death became more sanitary. Things have been getting pretty wacky in this portion of the series, but they're about to get even wackier. Next, we'll have a look at some of the expressions of the so-called swoon theory. See you then.